As Melissa mentioned, my name is Dr. Leah Varney. I am one of the physical therapists that works actually down here in the Bond Wellness Center, and I treat primarily sports and orthopedic populations.
And I'm Dr. Morgan Jenkins. I'm one of the occupational therapists, and I work upstairs. I work with the upper extremity, so anything from your fingertips all the way up to the shoulder.
All right, so as you know, we're here to talk about injury prevention in racket sports. Kind of the structure of how we wanted to play this out is the first half or so of our presentation is going to be big picture. So what are some general prevention strategies that you can use? And then towards the second half, we're going to talk about some specific injuries that we tend to see in these sports and then some tips on preventing those specific injuries. And then at the end, for those who would like to participate, in your handouts, there's a bit of a warm-up that we've created. So we're actually going to run through the warm-up for anybody who would like to participate, and then we can answer questions at that time. So again, we're going to start kind of big picture on, all right, what are some things we can do to help prevent injuries? Before we get into that, I'm going to talk to you about kind of defining some terms. If you're following along, I'm on the slide that says static versus dynamic stretching. Yep, they're in your folder, that big printout. Yep. And then you can write all over those, whatever you want to do.
That's what I was wondering.
Yep, so I think it's slide 3 or 4 at this point. Again, the top says static versus dynamic stretching. So if you flip one more page, yep, there you go. So just defining terms, so when we use these terms, you know what we're talking about. So when we talk about static stretching, that's you are getting into the position of stretch and you're holding it. This is great for general flexibility training. However, if we're looking at sport participation, this is not the best to do right before, because it actually does have a temporary effect of reducing your strength. It will also temporarily reduce your running and jumping performance. Not long lasting, it's just if you've just stretched a lot and then you try to participate in sport, it can actually have a little bit of a negative impact. So looking at dynamic stretching, that's where you're kind of coming into the position of stretch and then coming out of it. That's very good for a warm-up. It does not have those same effects of reducing strength. It actually improves your performance a little bit in terms of your power and your running and jumping performance. And we'll talk a bit about that more as we go, and also when we get to the actual warm-up portion of things. So in terms of warm-ups, on the next slide, this is one of the biggest ways that you can help to prevent injury is making sure that you are warmed up before you're participating in sport. That is something you always want to do, make it part of your routine. You want to get your body ready for what you're about to ask it to do. I just talked a bit about dynamic stretching. This is a great component of a warm-up. And you can also make it specific to the motions that are involved in your sport, so your body knows exactly what you're getting it ready to do, and it's ready to do that. When you're doing the stretching, you want to kind of start gradual, smaller ranges of motion. As you warm up, you can go into bigger stretches. Making sure you're warming up your whole body. So any racket sport or paddle sport, it's not just your arms that are working. It's your whole body. You're moving around, you're moving in multiple directions. You want to make sure that you're warming up every part of you to be able to do that. I just mentioned moving in multiple directions. So when you're warming up, move in multiple directions. We live our lives largely, not even forward and backwards, largely just forwards. So we want to make sure that when you're warming up, because you will be moving side to side, you will be probably moving backwards as well, that you're doing that when you're warming up. And then in general, start slow when you're warming up and then increase your speed as you go. So now I'm going to kind of move,
Any old questions till the end?
Yes, yep, we'll have a time for questions at the end. So when you're actually, we're looking at when you've warmed up, you're actually playing. One of the biggest risk factors for injury is fatigue. So when we get tired, we tend to have poorer technique. We don't move around as well in terms of quality. Our reaction times are slower, decision making is slower, which means basically as you're moving, you're not moving as well, and you're more likely to do something that could potentially injure you. So if you're playing, you're finding that you're fatigued enough that it's impacting how you're playing, take a break. Maybe just sit on the side for a little bit, see if you kind of feel like you come back, you get your energy back a little bit. If you're just done, it's best to call it a day and come back to it another day. That's going to help to reduce that risk that you're going to do something that could potentially hurt you. Something that's also very important before, during, and after you're playing is making sure you're hydrated. So water, our bodies have numerous functions that rely on water. So you want to give your body the fuel to do what it is that you're doing. If you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated. So making sure that you're staying ahead of that, particularly on warm days, which we have coming next week. Some very warm days supposedly coming. But you'll see on the slide there's some recommendations from the American Council on Exercise for about how much water you should be drinking and the timeline for that. So a couple hours before, you're going to be drinking a larger quantity of water just to kind of get that into your system. A little closer to smaller quantity, but still making sure you're taking in water. And then when you're actually exercising or participating in sport, it's still a smaller quantity, but you're drinking it probably a little bit more frequently. Again, if it's hotter or you're working harder, you're going to want to be on the higher end of how much water you're drinking. And it's not just about water either. We want to think about electrolytes, because when we sweat, we lose some of those. We need to replace them. Our body relies on electrolytes, nerve function, muscle function. We got to make sure we're incorporating those as well, again, particularly on those warmer days. There's sports drinks, there's smart water, little things that you could add to your water that have electrolytes, but there also are food sources of electrolytes. One of the examples I came across is watermelon. Obviously that has a lot of water in it as well, so you get some hydration and you get your electrolytes at the same time. Obviously you wouldn't only rely on that, but that's a good option to help give you those electrolytes as well. So we talked about kind of before, during, and then when we're looking at after play, recovery plays an important role as well in preventing injury. So we talked about static stretching earlier. This is a great time for it. Once you've finished playing, your muscles are warm, they're ready to be stretched. It's a good time to work on your flexibility. It also helps you to just decompress physically and mentally after you've been playing. So that's a great time to incorporate some of those static stretching. Nutrition also is very important. What's recommended is after you've been playing, eating a combination of both carbohydrates and proteins, because you've been using that. When you've been playing, you want to replace it. Protein in particular, just anecdotally, I've been talking with a lot of patients about that lately, and I think pretty much everybody I've talked to has been nowhere close to what they need to be taking in for protein. Your body uses that as building blocks for muscle growth, for most tissues in your body. So you want to make sure that you're fueling, again, what you're asking your body to do. We talked about hydration in the last slide in terms of its relation to when you're exercising, but also just making sure on the regular that you're taking in enough water. The general guideline is half of your body weight in ounces. So if you're 200 pounds, that's 100 ounces of water a day, spread throughout the day, ideally. Because if you get, it's 8 p.m. and you say, oh shoot, I didn't drink enough water, and then you're chugging a lot of water, your body is not going to absorb that. It's just going to go right through you. So trying to space it out throughout your day. And then finally, making sure that you have rest days. So you don't want to be playing your sport every single day, multiple times a day. We're going to talk a little bit later about some injuries that are related to not taking rest days. So making sure that you have at least one day per week that you're not participating in sport. And that's not rest as in sit on the couch and do nothing. It's active rest. Go for a walk, go for a light hike, just do your daily activities, but just not participating in those more strenuous activities. So your body has a chance to build itself back up, recover, and get ready to do it again.
So using the proper equipment can go a long way with injury prevention. And so the first thing I wanted to talk about was making sure that you have the proper grip handle size. Pickleball, maybe not as applicable because I think it's all like one size, right? But for tennis specifically, this is important. So if you are in the market for a new racket, a good way of finding the right size is measuring from the center of the palm up to the tip of the middle finger. Because a lot of times that measurement is listed on a graph, which is in the next slide, that correlates to a specific size. And oftentimes it's either like on the racket or you can find it online, like for specific rackets themselves, or online it's probably on the detail section. But if you want to check for the racket at home that you have, if you simply grip it and you can fit one finger in between the fingers in the palm, that's the right size for you. If for some reason your fingers are touching the palm or you can fit more than one finger, that's just indicating it's a little too big or a little too small. And then when you're looking at the weight of your racket, a heavier, more well-balanced racket tends to work better than the lighter rackets. And that's because lighter rackets force your arm to absorb more of the impact. And kind of with the rest of the equipment, it's all to prevent the shock, the force, and the vibration through your arm, because once it happens multiple times over and over, that causes muscle and tendon irritation, which then leads to injury later on down the road. So another thing you want to look for is shorter rackets tend to be more ideal, simply because it prevents you from overreaching and overextending that arm, and it keeps it closer to the body where it's a little bit more supported. And then flexible rackets are also more ideal because, again, it absorbs more of the shock so that your arm isn't taking that force. And then finally, strings should have a mild to medium tension because, again, it dampens that vibration that your arm and elbow receive, which in the long run is better for your arm and for your muscles. And so the next page is the grip size chart that I talked about. So that middle column is the measurement from the middle of the palm to the tip of the finger. And then on the left side where it says grip size, that would be the racket you would choose. And then along with the proper equipment, using proper technique and form also goes a long way with prevention. And so when you're serving in tennis or maybe in pickleball, try to avoid forcefully turning your palm down and snapping that wrist forward. Because even in your chair right now, if you were to do that, you might feel some tension in the wrist right here. And if you extend your elbow, you might even start feeling it in the forearm. So now if you imagine if you're doing that over and over and even having some force from the ball or from swinging, that's going to cause a lot of irritation in that forearm, which then leads to injury later on as well. And then when you're looking at the forehand technique, like the picture shown here, you want to try to keep your wrist in a neutral position, kind of like this, or slightly bent back, because again, it's a little bit more stable. You're not putting as much tension on the forearm muscles, so it's a little bit better for, for your muscles and tendons. And then you also want the ball to reach you. You don't want to overextend, like I said earlier. And so that's where that proper equipment with the shorter racket comes into play. That's just better for your arm overall. And then this may sound like common sense, but try to hit the ball in the middle of the racket versus, off center or around the rim, because again, it goes back to that vibration and the amount of shock that your arm is receiving. And I'm sure everyone here is super competitive and they get really into the game and they find themselves gripping their racket really, really tight. That's another thing you want to avoid, because even right now, if you were to make a fist and squeeze, you can probably feel your forearm muscles activating. And if that's happening a lot and for long periods of time, that muscle is going to fatigue. And like Leah was saying, fatigued muscles lead to injury, poor technique, things like that. And then finally, take advantage of your lower body, because you have some strong muscles. You want to use them. And then by using those larger and stronger muscles, it's going to lead to not overusing and not compensating with your arms. So now we're going to transition to talking about some of the common injuries that we see with racket sports and a lot of times that we see here in the clinic. And then we'll go over some prevention methods to make sure it doesn't happen to you. So some of the common injuries we're going to go over are tendinopathy. And then we kind of listed 4 different areas that we typically see with racket sports. And then we'll go over the prevention methods for that. And then we'll also go over ankle sprains and lower back pain. And so before we get into the nitty-gritty details of the specific injuries, we need to understand what tendinopathy is. So tendinopathy is affecting the tendons, which is what connects our muscle and bones together. And tendinopathy is simply an overuse injury. So the muscles and the tendons are overly strained until like micro tears form. And so when you start to experience pain and discomfort, that's a sign that there's already damage being done. So, that's something you have to deal with now. And so tendinopathy can be caused by several different things, but some of the main things are those repetitive motions that we kind of have touched on. poor technique or inappropriate equipment, and then not enough rest time between games and sessions to allow for recovery, and then not warming up correctly or properly.
Okay, so I'm going to start talking about some of the tendinopathies that can occur in the lower extremity. The first one I'm going to talk about is Achilles tendinopathy. So your Achilles is that kind of heel cord or that back of the ankle. It's the tendon that attaches your calf muscle down to your heel. And again, this is typically caused by overuse. Sometimes they call it abusive training, meaning you're overdoing it, you're not getting enough rest in that tendon. Those micro tears that are forming don't get enough time to heal. So with Achilles tendinopathy, this can occur in two primary locations along that tendon. It can be either at that mid portion, which is kind of the part of the tendon you can actually grab hold of, or it can occur at the insertion, which is down towards your heel bone. And with any tendinopathy, the symptoms tend to be gradual. There's not a moment of, oh, I just hurt myself. That's not how a tendinopathy occurs. It's just, oh, that's kind of starting to bother me. And then if you continue doing what you're doing, those typically will worsen over time. Some of the symptoms that you would see with Achilles tendinopathy is pain, usually with walking, coming up on the toes. If you're stretching out your calf, a lot of people have told me like stairs, particularly going downstairs, tends to be a bit more bothersome. There's usually some stiffness in that area. It's also possible you may actually have a bump or lump that you can feel on the tendon. And then it's often tender the touch, particularly in those more acute phases. Another spot on the lower extremity that you can have this tendinopathy is around the knee. So there's two primary locations around the knee that this can happen. It's either just above the kneecap, which is quadriceps tendinopathy, or just below the kneecap, which is patellar tendinopathy. This is typically more associated with like your jumping sports, things that are more explosive, but it does occur with tennis, and it can be extrapolated to occur with other racket sports. Like Achilles tendinopathy, pain is one of the common symptoms. The location is dependent on which area is affected. Again, it's just above the knee, it's that quadriceps tendinopathy. If it's just below the knee, it's that patellar tendinopathy. Typically with both of these, the symptoms will be worse if you're doing higher level activities like running, jumping, even with stairs, squatting, or if you're sitting for long periods of time, you can sometimes feel that as well. There are also stiffness, and it's possible that you could have some swelling as well around the knee.
Shoulder tendinopathy can also be pretty common, especially with those repetitive overhead movements that are involved with racket sports. And so other than the repetitive motion that we keep talking about, the deceleration phase of serves can also cause a lot of strain in that shoulder. And so when we say the deceleration phase, it's that sudden stop and change of direction that is what puts the strain in the shoulder. And so people that really need to be aware of this part of the phase are those with weaker shoulder muscles, just because the support isn't there as much, it's a little bit weaker. So that's why strengthening and all that is really important. And so if you're experiencing shoulder tendinopathy, again, you'll experience pain, especially with the overhead movements like serving and hitting the ball. But you might also feel some clicking sensation. And then again, you'll feel some stiffness, a little bit of weakness as well. So that's basically what shoulder tendinopathy is looking like. So the good thing with tendinopathy is that some general concepts and methods can be applied to different parts of the body. And so the first one is always warming up and cooling down, kind of like what Leah talked about at the beginning. You want to prep your muscles and your tendons for the activity you're about to do, and then take care of them afterwards. Making sure that you take those rest days, because this is when your body is able to heal, and especially heal those micro tears that are the root of tendinopathy. Listen to your body. If you're having pain, stop the activity. Don't push past pain because it's just going to make it worse. I like to tell my people the whole phrase, no pain, no gain, doesn't apply. We want to respect the pain. And then strengthen and stretch regularly. We want to keep those muscles strong and flexible to decrease the chances of injury. And then for the upper extremity and for your arms, using the proper technique and form is a huge way of preventing injury. I also wanted to touch on elbow tendinopathy, which is called lateral epicondylitis, also known as tennis elbow. And this is a condition that affects the outside of the elbow, specifically right here, like that bone that you can feel. And sometimes as it progresses, you'll have a pain and burning sensation down into the forearm. A lot of people will say that they notice that their grip is a little bit weaker, where like opening jars is a little bit more difficult. They find themselves dropping things a little bit more often. And then like the shoulder and the knee and all that, stiffness can also be present. So other than just the overuse and repetitive motion, it's specifically gripping a lot, or the tight grip, and then your wrist snapping back into that extension. And then also forearm muscle weakness can play a role into it. And again, going back to that poor technique, so that wrist snapping back. So some tips for preventing tennis elbow are limiting the motions that cause it. So trying to keep your wrist in a stable position that's neutral or slightly extended. Trying not to make it, snap back so frequently. And then lighten that grip on your handle. We don't want to strangle it. And then just like a general ergonomic thing that's important to take off the court is if you're lifting something heavy, don't hold it far away from the body. Bring it in closer. It's a little bit more supported, and it's not going to put so much strain on the elbows. And then if you're working out or at the gym, if you're lifting, try to keep the elbow slightly bent. We're not trying to hyperextend it or fully. So just, even if it's just a little bit, that kind of takes the pressure off the elbow a little bit. When using a backhand, try to use two hands, because that diversifies the force, so it's not just all centralized in one arm, and that kind of helps. And then going back to that tried and true stretching and strengthening, and you don't have to look now, but there is a packet in there with the first page or two that goes into some different strengthening that we prescribe to people to kind of help with strengthening some of those muscles that we often use with racket sports.
All right, so moving away from some of those tendinopathies, another common thing that we can see with racket sports are ankle sprains. So the most common type of ankle sprain is going to be a lateral ankle sprain, meaning it affects the outside of the ankle. And a sprain, all that is just it's a partial, or it can be a complete tearing of the ligaments, in this case on the outer ankle. So ligaments are what connect bone to bone. They're not super stretchy, you think kind of like a leather belt, but they just help to stabilize your joints. So in the case of an ankle sprain, those ligaments are compromised. This is caused by what we call an inversion injury, which is what you think about when you think about rolling your ankle kind of on the outside of the foot. Typically this will occur if you've just landed from a jump and maybe you landed a little funky, or if you're rapidly changing directions, maybe your foot slides, maybe somehow you were moving a little funky and that ankle rolls out. That's often when we would see that happen. Some symptoms that you would see with this, again, pain, typically on the outside of the ankle. Definitely you're going to see some swelling in the ankle, probably in the foot a little bit too. There's potential for bruising as well. Usually there's some stiffness associated with this, so that ankle range of motion tends to be reduced after an injury like this. And then depending on the extent of the injury, there could be some instability or feelings of instability in the ankle. I do want to kind of circle back to the bruising. So there's another injury that is a bit more concerning, that if you have bruising that's more in the middle of your foot, so here or the same place on the bottom of the foot, please seek out a medical provider fairly quickly, because like I said, there's an injury in that area that's a bit more concerning and needs immediate attention. So the bruising with an ankle sprain is more likely to be the outside of the ankle, but if you're seeing it in the foot itself, particularly that middle of the foot, either top or bottom, just make sure you get checked out. So some tips for preventing ankle sprains. Again, always warm up and cool down. I know that's a surprise to everyone here at this point. Making sure that your footwear is appropriate. So you want your shoes to be snug but not overly tight. And you also want to make sure that the footwear is designed for what you're doing. So a running shoe and a walking shoe typically only support you moving forward. They don't support you side to side very much because when you're walking and running, you're usually moving in one straight direction. So there are shoes that are made specifically for tennis. I actually don't know if there are specifically, I'm sure there probably are pickleball shoes too. Yeah, so typically those are gonna have more support for you laterally so that when you're moving in these directions, you're less apt to roll out the ankle because you're supported. Also those sport-specific shoes, sometimes the traction is a little bit different. It's made for the surface you're playing on so that you're not either having too much traction where you get stuck and roll or not enough where you might end up sliding. So making sure that you have appropriate footwear is helpful. Also training balance and strengthening the ankle. So training balance doesn't have to be complicated. Depending on what your balance is currently, it can be as simple as working on standing on one leg. You can stand on one leg on a pillow or a folded up yoga mat or play catch with somebody while you're standing on one leg. There's infinite ways, truly, to train balance, but just making sure that with that, you want a little bit of wobble in your ankle because that means that those muscles in and around the foot are having to work hard, and that means they're going to get better at it to be able to support you. And then you'll see a couple of pictures of ankle strengthening on that slide. That's also included in the handout that Morgan mentioned. That's working on pulling the ankle in and pulling it out. Those are the muscles, again, that will help to support your foot and ankle. And then if you have a history of an ankle sprain, research recommends that you get an ankle brace proactively when you're participating in sport because that can help to reduce your re-injury risk. That's not in isolation. It's not just, brace and don't worry about strengthening and balance training together. But because the stability of the ankle is likely compromised to some extent, giving yourself that added external support will be helpful to prevent re-injury. And the last thing we'll talk about today with specific injuries is low back pain. So there is a number of different causes of low back pain, different types of low back pain. For the sake of the presentation today, we're going to talk about low back pain that is truly just in the low back. So we call that central or axial low back pain. It's not going down into the legs. It's really just kind of sitting in your back itself. If you do have low back pain that goes down into the leg, ankle, foot, any changes in sensation or strength in the lower leg that's associated with back pain, please seek out a medical provider and let them, either us or a doctor, just make sure that they're assessing you and taking care of that. So again, we're talking about just a low back pain that stays here. Typically within the context of sport, that's going to be associated with core mechanics, so how you're moving, something about how you're moving, and or weakness. So when I talk about mechanics, a lot of times that's actually, yes, when you're playing, but it's the in-between. So you're going to pick up the ball however many times when you're practicing or playing. If you're repeatedly flexing and bending at the waist every time you go to pick up the ball, the back will often get a little irritated with you. Or when you're going to hit the ball, if you're really twisting a lot at the waist, that can also irritate the back. And then in terms of weakness, a lot of times there is weakness in the core muscles and or the hip muscles. Both are important to support your back. So in terms of preventing low back pain, big surprise, always warm up and cool down. Using proper body mechanics, which I'll touch a bit more on in the next slide. But one of the things is when you're turning, I mentioned the twisting. When you're turning, you want it to come from your hips and your feet. So when I'm turning, hopefully you can see. When I'm turning from my hips and my feet. My spine actually really isn't twisting versus this, where it's all coming from here. That's putting a bit more strain on the back versus if I'm turning from my feet, really the back doesn't take much of that rotational motion. And then strengthening your core and your hips. There's some examples on this slide. Again, these are also included in that handout. Does not have to be complicated, but just making sure that those muscles have a greater capacity to be able to support you and help you to move well. So I mentioned body mechanics. One of the biggest things with regards to sport participation, really any sport but racket sports, is what we call an athletic stance or a ready stance. So really the purpose of this is to get you ready to move in any direction quickly. What it looks like is it's that top left-hand picture where your feet are about shoulder width apart. They're usually parallel, maybe a little bit turned out. your weight is not one way or the other, it's pretty even. And it's essentially a slight squat. So you're just getting your muscles ready to move. They say typically your shoulders are about over your knees. So it's not a real deep squat, but just a little bit. And we want to see what we call a neutral spine. And we achieve that by doing what we call a hip hinge. So I can bend forward and I can do it like this, which is not great. Or I can bend forward by breaking at my hips, and then my back stays in what we call a neutral position, which is what the spine likes to be in. So I would say it's like somebody chopped you at the hips. You're think about a hinge on a door. It just moves like this. That's here and here, just hinging. And that will help to keep your back safe. While you're in that position as well, just making sure that you're keeping your core muscles active, again, so you're ready to move any which way and be supported when you do so. And then with regards to picking up the ball, there's a couple of options. Is you can simply squat down to the ball, thinking about, again, hinging at your hips, depending on your flexibility, trying to just simply squat down instead of bending over. The other option is that bottom left-hand picture is what we call a golfer's lift, where you're almost thinking about kind of your head and one of your feet as a seesaw. So you're going to pick something up like this. Sometimes with balance, that can be a challenge. I want you to be safe, so please don't try this if you feel unbalanced. But an option that you can use is if you have your racket, is just put the racket on the ground to provide another base of support. So when you go to pick up, you feel a little bit more balanced. And the purpose of that is, again, it just keeps that back a little bit more neutral. You're not bending over repeatedly.
So as a summary, we wanted to go over some of the key points we hope you take away from the seminar and then apply them to your game and your activity. So the overarching theme is kind of injury prevention doesn't just happen while you play, it happens before, during, and after. So we're gonna bring it up again, warm up and cool down. That's how important it is. You'd be surprised how many people don't, and that's why we see them. Yes, yes. So prepare your muscles for the activity and then cool down by using some of the dynamic and static stretching that Leah talked about. And then we'll go over a warm up right after this. And then listen to your body. It's as simple as if you're tired, take a break. If you're in pain, then stop. We don't want to push past that pain and then make things worse. Keep stretching and keep those muscles flexible and strong by stretching and strengthening. And if you start to form a routine, it's easier to kind of keep it going. That's the hard part though, is like starting the routine. Take your regular rest days because that's when the body is able to heal. And then finally, making sure that you drink plenty of water, having proper hydration, and ensuring that you have good nutrition because this is what fuels your body for play and for your activity. So we have a little disclaimer that you can read. And then, are there any questions? Yeah. Yes. Woo. Go ahead.
How long should the warm-up be? How do you know when you've done it?
So we're going to go over the warm-up that we created. When we were creating it, I ran through it. It took me, I think, about 12 minutes, minus there's something at the end that we'll go through that will be another couple minutes. So it may sound like a lot. It's about 15 minutes. It's really not that bad. It flies by. I think I actually skipped over that in that warm-up slide. It's written down, but a good way to know you've covered all your bases is make it a routine. I always say start at your head and work your way down to your feet, because then you know you've checked all the boxes as you go down. So it's not, oh, I warmed up here and then did I do here? You kind of just know once I get to my feet, I've covered my bases.
How long before you start playing should you do the warm-up? Like, do you do it at home and then drive 5 minutes?
Oh yeah, that's fine. I mean, if you're gonna sit and drive for 30 or 60 minutes, then I'd say maybe wait till you get there.
Yeah.
But if it's just a couple of minutes and you've done the warm up, you're feeling pretty warm, you sit in the car for a couple of minutes, that should be fine. Yep.
And for hydration, I know there's more than water and electrolytes. I mean, plain tea, coffee, any of those things work? Or?
I can get back to you on that. I'm probably not the best. I'd have to look into it a little bit. Obviously, there's liquids involved in both coffee and tea, but there's also other components that are at play when you're looking at those beverages.
Because I know, like, especially with like caffeinated drinks, they typically are diuretics, which make you lose more water. But yeah, we can definitely get back to you. If you leave like a name and number, we can like get back to you about that. That's a good question. Yes.
My main concern is hamstring pulls. Is that something that
Yep, so
you
there's,
address?
we didn't include anything specific on that. Yeah, in general, preventing hamstring pulls and strains is, again, strengthening and stretching. One of the, which we can talk about this more too, but in general, you want to include both concentric and eccentric strengthening, which just means concentric is when a muscle is shortening. So for the hamstring, that would be this. Eccentric is when it's contracting, but it's lengthening here. Again, we can talk through that a little bit. There are a few exercises that can help with that, but just making sure that you're actually loading your hamstrings up, i.e. exercising them in terms of strengthening and loading those muscles up to get their capacity greater, and also ensuring that you are warming yourself up beforehand, because if you go in cold, that's where you're more likely to see that.
I think I'm doing something right because I haven't pulled a hamstring in.
That's good. That's good. Yeah.
Wonder if we could talk a little bit more about the shoulder clicking.
Yeah. So you can chime in too, but it's not necessarily always painful, but sometimes you might hear like crunching almost a little bit and just like that clicking sensation.
But, yeah, I always.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
hurt, but
Yeah.
right
I
when
mean-
it's there, and then it just kind of.
Yeah.
And there, to be fair, there are multiple causes
Yeah.
of clicking in the shoulder that can be a symptom of tendinopathy, but there are also other things, but not always, but typically if it's not painful, you're not like having significant weakness or changes in function, not super concerned about that. I mean, it's something to note, or if it gets really, like gets worse or something like that, then that's something you could seek out a medical provider for, yeah.
My question is kind of silly, but you were talking about leaning over to get balls.
Mm-hmm.
Well, tennis players usually don't bother to do that, and they
Oh,
use
yeah.
a tennis racket and the foot, you
Yep.
know. Is there anything that we do that could be dangerous in doing that, or, you know, that you could get yourself hurt?
I mean, if you're doing,
It's usually, you know, using the tennis racket to push the ball and
Yeah.
then bouncing it. I mean, you know,
nothing jumps out at me.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
because, you know,
nothing,
you're kind of
nothing
bending
is
and
ever
doing some funny
foolproof.
things,
Nothing's
but-
ever foolproof that, oh, you'll never get injured. That's pretty low risk. Yeah, that's not something significant that I'd say, oh my goodness, you shouldn't be doing that. Yeah. Good question though. Any other questions?
I found that various parts of my body, in particular the shoulder, hurt more if I hit a bad shot. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of that again is technique,
Mm-hmm.
that your shoulder maybe is not in the best position when you went to
Yeah.
hit the ball, and then you've got the force coming through the racket
Yeah.
up through your arm.
Yeah.
And your body, your shoulder muscles are having to control that, also
Mm-hmm.
wrist and hand, but they're having to control that motion or that force,
Mm-hmm.
and that, yeah.
I guess especially with tennis, it's more so than racquetball because we have wood or something around the edge. If you hit the edge, you tend to
Yeah.
feel something like that
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
You know, like it's not a regular good solid.
Right,
Right.
right, yeah. Any other questions? All right, so we do, for those who would like to participate, it's certainly not obligatory. In the other paper that's in there, there is a general warm-up that we've created. Again, nothing's perfect, but it covers most of your bases to make sure that you are, again, warmed up at least generally and ready to go. It's in the backside of the one that I think it says general conditioning. Yes, if you flip a couple pages in, I didn't realize that they printed it all in one. So if you flip through, there's one that says general racket sport warm-up, or there should be. Yeah, there you go.
sport condition.
Yeah, so that first part is what we were mentioning. We're not going to go through that explicitly, but those are the ones that it says on there a couple times a week, just generally to keep up with strength. because we talked about that a
Yep.
few times, different injuries, is keeping yourself strong is going to help to reduce the likelihood of an injury. And those are just some general options to cover a lot of what we talked about in terms of the strengthening. But what we'll actually go over is the warm-up piece of it, which is 2 or 3 pages in. So our original plan was for whoever wants to is really just go through it. So starting at number 1 and going to number 2 and going through it, we might not do everything on both sides and do all that. We just want to make sure that you feel comfortable with it and like you could go out and then use that. So is everybody wanting to
Yeah.
participate? Okay. So Morgan's going to start off with the first half.
So for number 1, you might see it's a light jog or brisk walk. If you would like to do that, we can do that now. We're going to go into neck circles. So kind of start by looking down, and then you're going to kind of, there you go. You're going to do 8 to 10 times in one direction, and then you'll start again. If you get dizzy, that's okay
A
too.
lot of creaking, is that good or bad?
If it doesn't hurt, you're fine.
It's just part of it. If it's painful, again, this is what I
Yes.
talked about, starting smaller ranges of motion
Yep.
and working your way larger as you go.
Yep. Nice.
That's 8 in one direction, so go the other way.
Yep. Nice. Okay. And then we'll go directly into arm circles. So we'll start with one arm first. We'll go forward and then backward. So you'll want to do it 8 to 10 times each. So kind of go with big circles, but if you want to start small, you can, and then work your way up. So whatever you kind of feel comfortable with and what works for you. Yeah. Then once you do your 8, then you'll switch and go the other direction. Yeah.
It hurts?
Don't do it if it hurts. Yeah.
Or you can start smaller.
Yeah.
Yep. And see if you can gradually work your way up. You don't need to force it big.
Yeah.
You're
Just-
just trying to get those muscles working. Yep.
Yeah. Does that feel better?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Good. All right. So once you finish that, you'll go straight into your dynamic chest stretches. So you it's almost like opening a book a little bit. So you kind of open up your chest, and then you come and give yourself a bear hug, and then you'll come back out, and then you can switch which arm is on top each time you go to hug yourself. Ooh, shoulders pop.
And this one, as well, as you get comfortable with it, you can also increase your speed a little bit. So not that you're trying to fly through it, but as you start here, you can kind of get a little bit quicker with it so that your body's ready to move quickly. Sorry to the audio people.
Nice. Good. So then when you get to number 5, ideally you would have your racket, but for this purpose you can kind of just hold your arm, but we're going to be doing side bends. So feet are kind of shoulder width apart, and then you go in one direction, hold it for a little, and then you'll go to the opposite. And then you can do this 4 times each side. That feel okay for everyone? Good, good.
All right.
What's your suggestion about ibuprofen to handle? I have some soreness.
Well, it'll help. I mean, the other thing is if you're having pain regularly, that's when I would say maybe talk to your doctor, see if you can get a referral for PT or OT, and then we can take a look at you and see what we can find and see if we can do some things that are specific to you to help you with that.
I've been to a doctor who's given me cortisone.
Have you been through PT?
I'm sorry?
Have you been through PT?
A couple of years ago. Yeah.
Okay. Never hurts to brush up and try again and just see if that's helpful for you, because if it's been a few years,
What
give
about
it a try.
icing after?
Yeah, after you could. Yeah, I wouldn't do it before necessarily, but yeah.
After if you're in pain.
Yeah, again, we'll always go back to if you haven't already seen somebody, if this pain is new to you, or maybe you've never had somebody really take a look. then I would start there. But yes, ice can help to reduce some of those symptoms.
What about heat?
So heat can also help to reduce pain. If it's an acute thing, like I just hurt myself, heat is not ideal. Ice is preferable. Heat's going to help to relax muscles and things like that. But yeah, if it's an acute injury, usually you want to steer towards ice because there's typically inflammation involved, and heat doesn't necessarily help to reduce the inflammation. Yeah. Okay, so for the next one, we're going to have to be creative and spread out a little bit. So probably two people could be on the other side of this half wall. Somebody could be on the side of this treadmill closest. Somebody could be against this wall. But it's basically just something to have your self-supported. If that chair feels steady to you, you could use that. And then if
Can I use a chair?
you can, or I can bring this up for you, and then you can use a hand on this. Because we're going to work down now to the lower body, and we're going to work on some hip swings. So we're going to do this both forward and backward, as well as side to side. So again, you can be by something to help support you. So for now, place yourself sideways relative. So if I were going to be here, sideways. So we're going to start, watch me first. You're going to start swinging small, forward and backwards. And then as you get into it, you can swing farther. One thing I want you to avoid is excessively flexing or extending your back. Keep your belly muscles on so that most of the motion is coming from your hip itself. So give that a try. We're gonna have you try to do it 10 times forward and back. So again, you're swinging, start small as you get comfortable with it, and then you can gradually increase the range of motion. Try to keep your torso relatively upright. So you don't want it to become a full body pendulum. It's just mostly the hip. You should feel like you're getting a little bit of a stretch through the front and the back of the hip as you do this. Everybody feel okay with that? Okay, so that's forward and back. You would end up doing that on both sides. Yep. Looks pretty good. Then the next one, you would end up facing whatever support surface you're using. We're going to go side to side. So you'll come across the front of your body and then out to the side. So it would look like this as it gets larger. Yep. And start small, make sure it feels okay, and then begin to increase that range of motion. So the leg comes in front of the other one and out to the side. Again, avoiding lots of movement in the trunk. You don't want it to become a C curve in your back. Only go so far as that hip will let you go. So not doing a lovely ballerina move as we do it.
Is this good if you have hip pain?
If you're having hip pain while you're doing it,
No, if you generally have hip pain.
I mean, it's gonna loosen the hip up. Yeah, so as long as it's not bothering you, that should be fine, yeah. Everybody good? Okay. So the next one does require a little bit of balance, so I'm gonna give you two options. So these are walking lunges. So the full exercise would be you step forward into a lunge and then step through to another lunge. If that, particularly the transition can be challenging, going from one side to the other, what you can do is you can split it up. So you can do one lunge, stop in the middle, and then go to the other side. You can start small. The other thing is you could do this along a wall. So if anybody feels like, I'm not sure about my balance, there is this long half wall back here. So you could be on the track, have a hand on the wall. Any of the mirror space here, you can have a hand that can help to support you. Otherwise, if anybody wants to do it here on the track, feel free to find your space and try it out and just see how that feels for you. And then you can play with, everybody's heading together. You can play with, again, making it larger as you get more comfortable with it. Because if you're really small here, one, it's gonna feel uncomfortable, and two, your knees might not love you. So the larger steps is gonna let the glute muscles work a little bit more. Yeah, so I would take slightly larger steps. Yeah, there you go.
How many of these should we do in warm up?
So what I put down was about the length of the court. Again, if you're on depending on what court you're on, that could be fairly sizable. But, so it varies. But if I were in here, I probably would do it once down and once back. Just, you'll notice, you'll start to feel the hip muscles, the thighs turn on a bit, get a little bit maybe of slight muscle burn as you go, which is okay. That's part of getting yourself warmed up. Yep, that looks good. All right, and then when you're all set, I'll have everybody regroup back to the center of the gym. Yep. Does this all feel okay to everyone so far?
Yeah, I got a lot of cracking in my knee,
Yeah.
but it didn't hurt.
We call that
Cracking sound.
crepitus. It's just basically that kind of crunchy noise. All right, the next one, I'll again give you two options here. So working, you'll get a little bit of stretch in the hips, but also in the upper back. So feet are really nice and wide. I'll show you the both versions before I have you do it. So the full version is reaching towards the opposite foot and then opening up towards the sky. When you open up towards the sky, I want you to think about that coming from the upper back, not your lower back. So the core muscles, again, can be engaged. I'm not twisting like this, where it's my low back. I'm thinking about my spine is straight, and I'm trying to rotate from my upper back or in between my shoulders. That's option one. If it's too much to get low, like this, you can also just put your hand on the knee or somewhere between there and do it from here. Again, thinking about rotating from the upper back. Yeah, if it feels like a strain to get all the way to the foot or your balance feels off, feel free to come up higher on the leg. So put your opposite arm on the leg. Yep. There you go. So you'll end up with wherever you put this one on the leg, the upper arm is going to open up towards the sky. Again, thinking about the back is straight and it's from the upper back. There you go. Yep. And if you're coming all the way down, you'll probably also feel a bit of a stretch through the legs as you do this.
Knees bent or straight?
Unlocked. So they are pretty much straight, but they're not forced straight. Yep. And again, feels okay to everyone so far. So those multiple variations that you can do there. The other option for some people, if that's even too much to get the upper back, is you could come against a wall and then open here. Again, twisting from the upper back. You won't get the stretch in the legs, of course, but you'll get the upper back if that's too much to do it bending over. So 4 to 5 times each direction. Again, you're kind of just continuing to open up and stretch out. The next one, depending on your balance, you could do against a wall or you could do it out in the open. We're gonna do some heel raises. So I have people doing 15, slow and controlled. Yeah, so you could go put a hand on a wall. Yeah. There we go, yep. So again, we mostly are working top down, like we talked about earlier.
Does it make a difference if you do it with or without shoe?
Not necessarily. I mean, again, we're also assuming that this is a warm-up, that you're probably about ready to play, so you probably have your shoes on. Yeah. And then once you've done 15, slow and controlled, we're gonna do them faster. So it's not jumping, but it's similar, but the balls of your feet stay in contact with the ground. So you're going up and down quickly. Yep. Again, this is the one where if you didn't need balance before, you might find you need a hand on something. Yep. You might get a little bit of a burn in the calves. This is preparing the tendon to move quickly. So we moved it slow and controlled, and then we're moving it quickly because we're going to be moving quickly when we're playing sports. Yep. All right.
That was tiring.
Yes. Yeah, so that's a good one. I think we included calf raises also in our conditioning warm-up, or
Well,
conditioning handout.
And like, I guess my question is, if you're doing that and you get tired, you've warmed up.
You, essentially, I mean, yeah.
So.
I don't want you to fatigue yourself out so much that you're already fatigued before you start.
Yeah.
So I put down 15, but if you say, you know what, 10 is good for me, I feel like I'm pretty well warmed,
Yeah.
then that's fine. So now we're gonna give you, we'll definitely have to spread out. So, well, I'll show you first and then I'll have everybody find a yellow band. Going back up to the shoulder. So ideally, what you would do, I can grab a towel and show you, but you'd want a towel roll, or if you have like a jacket that you brought with you, something to just give a little space between your rib cage and your elbow. That's ideal. We're gonna do 2 different directions for the shoulder, so I'll do it facing both ways. The first one is external rotation, so you're rotating away from the body and then back to the body. This is another one where we're gonna have you do, again, about 10 or 15 slow and controlled, and then you're gonna try to do it quickly, preparing those tendons to move quickly. So that's one, and then, could you guys see that okay? Okay. The other one, actually I can just do this, is the opposite direction. So external rotation is away from the body. This you would do on both sides, I'm just demonstrating on one. Internal rotation is coming towards the body. So again, you'd have something here, ideally. With both of these, the motion comes from here. You don't want to end up bending, straightening, wrist, funky things happening. I always tell people you could do this with a cast on that goes from here to here, because this, relatively speaking, should not move. It's a spinning of the ball and socket joint of the shoulder. So again, this one is now coming across, 10 or 15 nice and slow, and then 10 or 15 quickly. You still want it to be controlled, so you don't want to be all over the place, making sure that you still have control even though you're moving quickly. So if everybody could find, we've tied up in various places around the gym, yellow bands. You can choose whichever you would like
How do
to.
you know what color band you should use? Oh, the yellow is simple, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah, we started with the lighter bands because different people are different strengths.
Okay, but should you, if you can use one,
So-
how do you know when to move to the
So
next color?
with the warm-ups, you don't want it to be really hard to do because, again, you're getting warmed up.
Okay.
You don't want it to be like really working hard. That would be more on the conditioning part of the handout, where you would be working at a resistance that is more challenging for you. This shouldn't feel super taxing. Yeah.
How do you stand to get it to?
So this one is a little bit high for you. So I would hold it. I kind of tend to wrap it around my hand a little bit. So you want to stand here, open chest.
In front of it, I mean,
Yeah.
behind it, okay.
Yep, so you would be behind it, so you can pull out. And then you can spin around to pull.
In, oh, okay.
Yeah.
What was the first one?
So the first one is pulling out.
And this.
So if you were doing the first one that I showed you, you can do either order, that's fine. If you want to do external rotation, you can stand a little closer and grab it with this hand.
Oh, okay, and
Yep.
then the same
Yep,
motion?
keep this a little bit bent and then you're pulling out like this. Yep. So you don't want to let the elbow move. If you had that towel or your jacket or what have you, you keep it pinned
Oh, I see
to
what
your
you
side.
mean.
Yep. There
Okay,
you go.
so there's,
Yep, so there's external rotation, and then internal would be, if you're using that arm, turn around, or now, how you're holding it. Yep, so if you're working with the same arm, this is now, yep, again, imagine you're keeping something pinned to your side, and don't let it come across.
Over at some point.
oh, okay.
So keep this, keep your elbow, so this is where, this is not perfect, but keep that pinned.
Well,
So you don't want to let the elbow move. It stays where it is.
okay,
Mhm.
maybe.
This is also a little high for you, but, so stop for 1 second. So you're just spinning like this.
So that's as far as it goes.
And this is, but yeah. Yeah, and keep your wrist still, so you don't let it, then, that's better. Are you guys doing okay here?
Yeah, I think so. I think I did it, but boy, that went fast, it really tires you out.
It does. Yep, so again, if you feel like you're completely and totally like wiped, at the end. Maybe instead of doing 15, you try 10. Yeah. But again, you're going to be hitting quickly, so you want to be ready to do that and not just say, oh, I warmed up slow, but now I'm suddenly going to be moving fast.
Right.
You're preparing that muscle of the tendon to do just that.
Yep.
When you do the fast ones, should you try to bring it over?
I'm good at being much
Nope.
better.
So with all of these, you want to keep your elbow pinned to your side. So hold on one second. So if you had something here, you're going to spin this way.
Oh, not across.
Correct. Yep. And it's the same thing out where you're just spinning. My elbow doesn't do this.
So out.
Yep. And you already did the slow on this pulling out.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So it's helpful if you had something pinned
I
here.
usually use a towel.
Yep, that's perfect. So make sure you're spinning.
Okay.
He was on the younger side.
All right. Looks like.
Not like muscles.
Oh, yep.
That's what, but the shoulder doctor said it was probably as a result of mine.
Okay. All right. Did everybody get a chance to try that? I think so. So now that we're fairly warm, we're going to do kind of the last big warm up is working on moving quickly in general. So we're going to do some shuffles, both sideways and then forward and backwards. So the side shuffle, you're going to do that athletic stance that we talked about. So that like a little bit of a squat. Think about your hips coming back a little bit. There you go. Yep. So it's like there's a chair behind you and you're just starting to get ready to sit in it. Yep. So the side shuffle is this. Yep. So we can take turns with this. So we'll let people take turns one way and then the other way. Again, make sure to look out for your neighbor, or we can use this path. Yep, you can do it to make sure your shoes aren't slippery. That's all.
They probably are.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And you can also, when you're doing this, warming up, you can do it holding your racket so that you're getting ready for it. And then open up your chest a little bit. There you go. Yep. Just look out for that. Yep, that looks great. Yep. Everybody feel okay there? I know it's a little chaotic, but we're making it work. All right, so everybody got a chance to do it side to side. So let me talk through forward and backwards before we have you actually try it. So forwards, it's a little bit more of a jog when you do it forwards and backwards, but again, just kind of a light jog forwards. Backwards is the key. So when we go backwards, we need to be in that athletic stance. If my weight is on my heels and I'm trying to go backwards, that's when we have spills backwards. So we want to make sure that we're starting in that athletic stance. My weight is more towards the front of my feet. And even though I'm moving backwards, I still have that little bit of a tip forwards so that when I'm moving backwards, my weight is distributed over my feet. Not, well, let's just say the balls of my feet, because I can move quickly that way. I can't move quickly if my weight's on my heels. So I prefer to have probably one at a time do this. If you're comfortable with it, you don't need to go speed racer, but have us try here because also we're moving backwards. No collisions today.
You want us to go forward too, or just backwards?
Yep, you can try. So whoever wants to do it, you can go forward, down, and then back on the way back. Brave volunteer. So one at a time, let them go all the way. Yep, open up your chest a little bit. There you go. And make sure you tip forward a little bit. There you go. You should feel like your weight's on the balls of your feet. Do you feel balanced when you're doing that?
Pretty much.
Okay, good. Yep. All right. You got it. Yep. Good. That's it. Your weight is nicely distributed. You should feel, again, fairly balanced. Yep. Open up your chest a little bit. There you go. When I say open up the chest, it doesn't mean you have to tip more upright. It just means you're getting more space in the front. There you go. The other thing, again, if you're playing, your hands are probably in front of you. That will also help you to stay more balanced versus if your hands are here, you might feel a little bit off. So let your hands be in front of you. because that's where your racket or your paddle will be. Yep. There you go. Tip forward just a little bit more. There you go. Because then your weight, again, is centered over the balls of your feet. If you're too upright, it's going to be behind you. All right. That's it. That looks pretty good. Feel pretty balanced?
Sorry?
Good. Yep. There you go. Yep.
Except we're taught in pickleball never to run backwards.
Right. In general, it's better if you don't.
Right.
But there's going to be a moment when you probably
All the
start.
time.
Yeah, and that is like one of the cardinal sins is don't backpedal. So that I should have said that too.
But it's good practice because
Yeah.
it's much less likely to get yourself.
Right. Again, ideally, yes, you would turn and go in the direction that you're going versus backpedaling, but still getting yourself ready to move in the directions that you may end up in tennis. Yep. So that's the big thing with that is getting yourself used to having the proper weight distribution so that you're not essentially kind of stumbling or falling backwards. You want to be able to be controlled so that you're safe. And then the last thing we won't actually necessarily do, but it's called shadowing. If any of you are familiar with that, that's when you're basically going through, using your racket, going through the motions that you would be doing when you are actually playing. So you're pretty nicely warm now. Go through your serve, forehand, backhand, just the things that you would be doing so that you're specifically warmed up for what then you're going to be doing when you're playing. So again, it probably will take you right about 15 minutes. It's not terribly long. It might seem like it initially, but once you get into the rhythm of it, you'll be there, you'll be ready to go. And then you're warmed up, hit a couple practice volleys back and forth, and then you should be, again, generally warmed up and ready to go. I'm sure we probably are all a little bit warmer than when we were before we started moving. Any questions on those?
Are the sheets clear enough so that when we get home, we can remember?
Well, they should be, but that's also specific to you and what clear is to you.
Okay.
So if you want to take a look over them, you certainly can, and then we can hopefully clarify if there's a specific question. We tried to make it as clear as possible. But yeah, so if you want to take a quick look.
Do you have any tips for cramp, avoiding cramps, how to avoid cramps?
I mean, in general, it's often related to hydration
Yeah.
or electrolytes. Yeah. That's the most common thing.
Okay.
I mean,
Does
keeping
that
it.
apply if your cramp doesn't happen when you're playing, but you're in bed at night?
I mean, it can be.
Is that really?
It can be, yeah. Yeah, often there's that. I mean, you can talk to your doctor about that, but yeah, in general, yeah, it could be hydration or like an electrolyte thing, minerals, that, yeah. So
Do you recommend the same exercises for cooling down?
So we didn't create a cool down, but you could do the static stretching. So we talked about I know I saw you were doing some hamstring stretching. That's also one. You can do that dynamically too, so you can kind of come in and out of it if you're looking at a warm up. But yeah, you could do your hamstring stretches. You could still do that forward fold one that we were doing here. You could even do it both hands one way. You could do a lot of them just at a slower pace. So you could do the chest stretch that we did. You could do the overhead stretch.
And then for the ankle balance, is doing it with your eyes closed?
That will make it
best?
harder.
But is that better? If you can do it?
I don't want to say it's better, it's different. Because you're taking away a system that helps you with balance. Because there's a number of systems, vision is one of them. So if you take vision away, it'll make it harder. It's going to challenge the we call proprioception, which is your joint sense of where it is in space. So yes, you can do that, and it will make it a little bit harder. It also depends on somebody's balance at baseline. If they're like all over the place, just standing eyes open, then I wouldn't have you close your eyes. But if you're, perfectly still, then you can play with closing your eyes and you'll see I wobbled a little bit more. But so you can do that. Again, obviously, if you're in a safe place where if you need to, you can grab something, things like that. But yeah, that makes it harder. Any other questions?
Thank you.
All right, thank you for coming.